बेटा मैं शुरू करूं?
जी मैम स्टार्ट कर दे लेक्चर।
अच्छा चले, अभी तो सलाम दुआ करती हूँ, 5 मिनट अभी है। ठीक है, थैंक यू बेटा, मैं शुरू करती हूँ।
वेलकम मैम, वेलकम।
ओके जी बेटा, सो अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड a very good better afternoon after yesterday's and last night's rainfall. Things definitely have improved as far as heat is concerned. Yesterday was hot, then came the rain. I hope it did rain where you people all are residing, because गर्मी बहुत है. It's very humid. Temperature isn't much, but it's very humid. Anyway, so अभी से पहले कि हम आगे जाएं, when is Eid expected to be? Date क्या है? ताकि हम अपना प्लान उस तरह कर लेना बेटा. 31st को है. Okay Faisal, thank you. And 31st would be, अच्छा ठीक है, that means, और अभी ईद की छुट्टियां तो अनाउंस नहीं हुई anyway, because once you come back from Eid, 4th को आपकी हमने final stage plan की हुई है, and 4th is a Monday, and 4th को ही इंशाल्लाह 5th को इंशाल्लाह we will start with neuroanatomy, the last topic. अभी के लिए ये 5th topic जो है 5th substage का, let's quickly complete the larynx. 108 students, the rest are probably not interested. Good, I'm glad. One more question, G, bete. हाँ, इंशाल्लाह इंशाल्लाह जिस तरह अब कर रही हूँ कि इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक्स जितने भी हैं वो मैं पुट करवाऊंगी. That makes it around 2/3 of topics. वो मैं नहीं करवाया है सारा. बेचारी फातिमा just helped me out with so many things, लेकिन majority तो मैं नहीं करवाया है. वो भी इसी तरह ही इंशाल्लाह. जिंदगी से तंदुरुस्ती शर्त है बेटा, तो इंशाल्लाह I'll do it myself. Any other question before we go any further? चलो फिर जल्दी से लैरिंक्स कंप्लीट करें और एयर शुरू करें. ठीक है जी. So by the way, before I forget, we have inducted a new teacher in anatomy. Dr. Munib उनका नाम है. He's a senior demonstrator. He's done 2/3 of his MPhil. सिर्फ उनका thesis का कुछ part रहता है. The rest is all done. So tomorrow morning, inshallah, 11 o'clock, 11 to 12, he will be taking a class on 9th, 10th, 11th cranial nerves. ठीक है, वो जो initially मैंने फातिमा को दिया था, तो I've given it to Munib. So please listen to him carefully. And Wednesday I have a class, so you can give me your feedback if you feel like it. I'm not forcing you to do it. और दूसरा, if there's anything you want me to repeat, because आगे revision classes हैं. एक फ्राइडे को है, एक मंडे को मेरी है, एक मंडे को फातिमा की है. So if you want me to repeat anything, मुझे आपको बताना होगा. Even if there's anything that Fatma has covered and you want me to repeat that thing, तो फिर आपको मुझे 1-2 दिन पहले बताना होगा. ठीक है. So अब जल्दी से इसको खत्म करते हैं. Larynx को, parts of the inside of the larynx, the laryngeal cavity, वो हमने कर ली थी उस दिन, but still this is the vestibule of the larynx. ठीक है, from the inlet to the vocal folds, this is the middle part of the laryngeal cavity. Extending laterally from the middle part was the ventricle between the vocal folds and the between the vestibular folds and the vocal folds. This lateral extension of the cavity of the larynx is called ventricle, laryngeal ventricle. Please call it laryngeal ventricle. This is to differentiate it from the ventricles of the heart or the ventricle of the brain that will do inshallah next month. And then this part below the glottis, this is the infraglottic part. This part is the infraglottic part of the larynx. Ye sara jo hai, this is the glottis. So this is the infraglottic part up to here. Ye cricoid ka lower part border hai. Yahan pe larynx hoti hai beta. So this part is the infraglottic part of it. This is the supraglottic part. Okay? अच्छा जी, आगे चलते हैं. ये मैं आपको इत्तेफाक करवाना चाहती हूँ because this is extremely important. What exactly do we mean by vocal folds? Beta, vocal folds are basically folds of mucous membrane. Now, what is lying? Certain structures are lying within this double fold of mucous membrane. ये देखिए, ये mucous membrane का fold है. It comes towards the midline, folds upon itself. Now, what does it enclose between the two layers of these folds? From the medial end, let's go laterally from the medial end. Medially, you have the vocal ligaments. ये जो whitish है ना, this is the vocal ligament. Lateral to it, this green line, this is the muscle, vocalis muscle. Okay? Over here, this is the ये green जो है, ये vocalis muscle है. And still laterally, you have the thyroid and thyroid muscle. All these are covered by mucous membrane. And together they make up the vocal folds. मैं इसको एक बार फिर repeat कर देती हूँ because it's extremely important. They are a double fold of mucous membrane. This double fold of mucous membrane encloses within its two folds. From medial to lateral, it is vocal ligament. It is vocalis muscle, and lateral most is the thyroid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage. So this is the thyroid muscle, most lateral structure. अब ये vocal ligaments exactly हैं क्या? Vocal ligaments, this is the conus elasticus. Remember I told you the other day, this is the cricoid cartilage attached to the cricoid cartilage laterally and extending towards the midline. You have this elastic fibers running. They make up the conus elasticus. And the medial most border of conus elasticus that extends from the inner surface of the thyroid cartilage to the vocal process of the arytenoid. This medial thickening of conus elasticus is called vocal ligament. ठीक है? Vocalis muscle के बारे में we'll talk about it later, but just to I hope you appreciate one thing. Since this is an extremely important muscle because it is involved in voice production. So medial to the vocalis muscle, you have the vocal ligament, and lateral to the vocalis muscle, ये green में vocalis muscle है. So lateral to the vocalis muscle, you have the thyroarytenoid. अब ये जो vocal folds है ना, ये एक तो voice production, everybody knows that they are involved in voice production, but a very important action of these vocal folds is that they act as a sphincter. When the two vocal folds come together, meet in the midline, they close the cavity of the larynx. Okay? As a result, no foreign body can go inside. So it acts as a sphincter. Okay. Now you will very often come across this term, which is glottis. क्या होता है glottis? Glottis is this: the vocal folds and the space between the vocal folds. This space between the vocal fold, I told you the other day, is called rima glottidis. Okay? So when we talk about this term glottis, we mean vocal folds plus the rima glottidis. That is the space between the two vocal folds. अब ये जो रीमा ग्लॉटिडिस है ना, इसकी शेप वेरी करती है. The shape varies according to the shape of the vocal cords, how they are oriented, whether they are tense, whether they are relaxed, whether they are lengthened, whether they are shortened. All that determines whether they are approximated, whether they are far away from each other. All these things determine the shape of the rima. Okay, because the rima is bounded by the two vocal folds. Up normal breathing में, this is the resting position, like hopefully you are doing at the moment, normal breathing. There is a very little gap between the two vocal folds. So this is, the rima is narrow. In case of normal breathing, this rima is narrow. In case of forced breathing, the rima becomes kind of trapezoid in shape. So this is forced respiration. Phonation mein, it becomes like this, slit like. And yeah, this is what happens during whispering. The vocal folds, they are approximated, but the arytenoid cartilages, they are far away from each other. So posteriorly a gap is left. This is what happens in whispering. सब कुछ आपकी किताब में से लिया है. Every word is given in your book. Every word was taken from your book. No other book was followed. Vestibular folds की बात करते हैं. ठीक है. I hope you remember this was the epiglottic fold. That was this epiglottic fold was hanging, a double fold of mucous membrane that was hanging on the inside of the trachea. ये trachea, thyroid cartilage. Sorry, trachea नहीं, thyroid cartilage. This is thyroid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage, and perched on top of the cricoid cartilage, this is the arytenoid. और ये उसके ऊपर corniculate cartilage है. ठीक है. अब ये जो epiglottic fold है, this is a fold of mucous membrane that hangs on the inside of the thyroid cartilage. It has a lower border that is free. Now extending this lower free border extends between the thyroid cartilage on the inside and the arytenoid cartilage, the vocal process of the arytenoid cartilage. So between the epiglottic fold and the free lower margin, this fold is called quadrangular membrane या quadrangular ligament. ये देख लीजिए, ये rod shaped uniform cartilage है. इसको आपको कहा था, it is not attached to any cartilage larynx. ये free पड़ी होती है within the epiglottic fold कह लें या quadrangular membrane कह लें. ठीक है. So at the cost of repetition, ये जो quadrangular membrane है, ये it has a lower free border which is extending between the inner surface of the thyroid cartilage and the arytenoid cartilage, the vocal process. It is simply a fold of म्यूकस मेम्ब्रेन। अब ये जो फोल्ड ऑफ म्यूकस मेम्ब्रेन है जिसका प्री लोअर बॉर्डर है between the thyroid cartilage and the retinoid, vocal process of the retinoid, this is called vestibular fold. ठीक है, ये vestibular fold है, and this space between the two vestibular folds is called rima vestibuli. पहले रीमा ग्लॉटिडिस था, जो ग्लॉटिस के दरमियान ये था, ये रीमा ग्लॉटिडिस है, and this is रीमा वेस्टिबुलाई. बेटा अब ये vestibular fold है over here. This is the vocal fold extending between the lower part of the thyroid cartilage and the vocal process of the retinoid. ठीक है, ये inferiorly ये vocal fold है, and this space between the vestibular fold and the vocal fold, meaning this space, this is the laryngeal ventricle. Okay, और एक one thing before I wind up this topic, हम पहले भी इसको कई दफा डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, that is ये जो vestibular folds है ना, they are simply protective in nature because they are lying superior to the vocal folds. Okay? So they afford protection to the cavity, underlying cavity. Yeah. Is this clear? Before I go on to the muscles of the larynx. Any questions? अच्छा, ठीक है, मैं repeat कर देती हूँ. Repeat क्या करना है? Vestibular folds करने हैं कि vocal folds करने हैं? Quadrangular membrane कर दूँ, okay? गौर आप क्या कहेंगे? What do you want me to repeat, गौर? Vestibular folds. So basically, with quadrangular membrane ही है. अभी कर लेते हैं बेटा. बेटा this is the epiglottic fold. This is the epiglottis. This is the retinoid cartilage. ये ठीक है, ये retinoid cartilage है, ये epiglottis है, attached to the posterior surface of the ये thyroid cartilage है, and this is the cricoid cartilage. ये cricoid cartilage है. Sitting on top of the cricoid cartilage is the retinoid cartilage. Sitting on top of the retinoid cartilage is the corniculate cartilage. Okay? And lying free within the epiglottic fold is the corniculate cartilage. Ab, this is the epiglottis and this is the retinoid cartilage. A fold of mucous membrane extends from the epiglottis to the retinoid cartilage. ये epiglottis से retinoid तक, इसको एपिग्लॉटिक, ये एपिग्लॉटिक फोल्ड कहते हैं. ठीक है, so this is called epiglottic fold. Now the other name for this epiglottic fold is quadrangular membrane. अब ये जो quadrangular membrane है या epiglottic fold जो है, the superior end is made up of epiglottic ligament from the lower half of the epiglottis to the retinoid, epiglottic ligament. ये इसके upper half में ये जो है, ठीक है. इसकी लोअर एंड फ्री है। इस सारे फोल्ड की ये जो क्वाड्रेंगुलर मेम्ब्रेन है इसका लोअर एंड फ्री है। ये देखिए, it has a free lower end which extends from the posterior surface of the thyroid cartilage. ये thyroid cartilage है बेटा। From the posterior surface or the inner surface, we tell you interior. This is the interior of the larynx that we are talking about. From the inner surface of the thyroid cartilage to the arytenoid cartilage. Arytenoid का भी vocal fold. Extending between these two, thyroid cartilage का inner surface and the vocal process of arytenoid. The part of the quadrangular membrane extending between thyroid cartilage and the arytenoid cartilage. This has a free border. ये देख लीजिए, free lower border. Anteriorly attached to thyroid cartilage, posteriorly attached to the arytenoid. But this is the free lower border. This free lower border is called vestibular fold. ये whitish सा जो नजर आ रहा है, this is the vestibular fold. इस section में अगर हम देखें तो this is the quadrangular membrane. ये heavy epiglottic fold है ये, and ये देख लीजिए, this has a free lower border. This makes up the vestibular fold. Now what is ये simply आपको पता है fold of mucous membrane है. This space between the two folds was the vestibular fold of the right and left side. This space between the two vestibular folds is called rima vestibulari. ये vocal fold है, all this. ये vestibular fold है. Between, ये आपको बताया था, ये middle cavity of the larynx है, और ये भी बताया था कि this middle cavity of the larynx extends laterally between the vestibular fold and vocal fold. So इनके दरमियान laterally ये extend करती है, and this forms what is called laryngeal ventricle. मैंने खाली ventricle लिखा है, it should actually be laryngeal ventricle. This is just to differentiate it from ventricles of the heart or ventricles of the brain, whatever. This is the laryngeal ventricle. The lateral extension of the larynx, laryngeal cavity between the vestibular and the vocal fold. This is the laryngeal ventricle. और पूछो बेटा, anything else? Any more questions, Peter, regarding this before I go on to muscles? Okay. You're welcome, my dears. You're always welcome. Gee, muscles, we divide it into an extrinsic group and an intrinsic group. Extrinsic group we've discussed already in detail. You have these suprahyoid muscles that elevate the larynx as a whole, and then you have these infrahyoid strap muscles that depress the larynx as a whole. They act on the muscle as a whole. Okay. Then we have the intrinsic muscles. The intrinsic muscles act on the structures inside the larynx, vocal cords, vestibular folds, on these membranes, etc., on different cartilages, etc. ये जो है muscles, they change the length, they change the tension in the vocal folds, how tense they are, whether they are relaxed or no. Then, because of change in length and change in tension of the vocal folds, the shape of the rima that changes. So they change the shape and size of the rima glottis. Okay. So basically, in muscles का दो functions हैं. They change the length and tension of the vocal cords, and they change the shape and size of the rima. Yeah, rima की. अच्छा जी. So अब let's quickly finish off with a general overview of the nerve supply of these muscles. एक rule है. All the muscles of the larynx are supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve except one, and that is cricothyroid, which is supplied by the external laryngeal nerve. Basically 10th nerve ही है सारी all over. ठीक है? The muscles of the larynx, all of them are supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The only muscle not supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve is cricothyroid, which is supplied by the external laryngeal nerve. Action जो है, it is best studied if we consider the muscles as groups. Individuals study करने के बजाय, if we study them as groups, so their action is well appreciated. We study them as abductors and adductors. That means the muscles that open, move the vocal cords in a medial direction or in a lateral direction, approximate the vocal cords or move them away. ठीक है? दूसरा है tensors or relaxers of the vocal cords, whether they tense the vocal cord, whether they relax the vocal cord, and then the sphincters, the muscles that act as sphincters. One by one, let's do these groups. Let's do the abductors and adductors. Peter, would you appreciate these are the vocal folds, the vocal cords, whatever you want to say, and the space between them is called rima glottidis. Okay? Hali rima nahi kehna because there's also a rima vestibuli. So this is rima glottidis. अब ये जो abductors and adductors जो हैं, they move the vocal cords. They obviously, if they move the vocal cords in a medial or in a lateral direction, they either open the rima glottidis or they close it. One by one, let's do these muscles. Lateral cricoarytenoid, ये वाला muscle, this one. ये मैं end में करूँगी. इस पर थोड़ा time spend करना है. ठीक है? Lateral cricoarytenoid. Please note, this is the muscular process to which is attached the lateral cricoarytenoid. It pulls the muscular process anteriorly. I hope you remember that I told you the muscular process of the larynx. Arytenoid cartilage का जो muscular process था, that was directed posteriorly. Okay, so this muscular process is directed posteriorly. जबकि vocal process जो था, वो anteriorly directed था. Now, when this muscular process which is lying posteriorly, when it is pulled anteriorly, so what will happen? ये जो vocal process है ना, जिसको vocal cords attached है, this vocal process will move medially. ये देख लीजिए. If it is moved in this direction, ये end automatically, if we come close, ये muscle है. Cricoarytenoid. ये cricoid cartilage है, इसके ऊपर arytenoid cartilage है. So this is the cricoarytenoid. ठीक है? अच्छा. अब transverse arytenoids की बात कर लेते हैं. ये देख लीजिए, ये transverse arytenoids है. When they contract, they bring the arytenoid cartilages close to each other. Similarly, oblique arytenoids, they bring the arytenoid cartilages close to each other. So transverse and oblique arytenoids are more or less एक ही function, and this is the transverse arytenoid, this is the oblique arytenoid. Okay. Now we come to the most important posterior cricoarytenoid. This is how it is placed on the cricoid cartilage, posterior surface of the cricoid cartilage, the arytenoid cartilage, इसकी muscular process. ठीक है बेटा, अब देख लो, it is on the posterior surface. Okay? काम क्या है इसका? It is when the two muscles contract, they come close to each other. The two muscles contract, they come close to each other. The other end is attached to the arytenoid cartilage. So when they come close to each other, so they bring the muscular process of the arytenoid cartilage with them. The two muscles are coming close to each other. They bring the muscular process with them. When the muscular process moves down, ये जो vocal process है, this moves laterally, इस direction में. When they move, two vocal processes, when they move laterally away from each other, तो ये vocal folds भी laterally move करेंगे, and the rima glottidis will open up. मैं इसको फिर रिपीट कर देती हूँ बेटा. दिस इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम इंटररेटिनॉइड या ओब्लिक रेटिनॉइड्स. ठीक है, ये तो आपस में एक दूसरे को लगे हुए हैं ना. रेटिनॉइड टू रेटिनॉइड ही है ना, ये भी रेटिनॉइड टू रेटिनॉइड है, ओब्लिक रेटिनॉइड, ट्रांसवर्स रेटिनॉइड, ये तो क्राइकॉइड को लगा ही नहीं हुआ. सो दैट इज व्हाई इनकी मूवमेंट फर्क है. ओके, दिस इज सिंपली when it contracts, it pulls the muscular process of the cricoid downwards like this. When the muscular process of the cricoid moves posteriorly, ये जो vocal process है, they move laterally. ये देख लीजिए, vocal process move laterally. As a result, the rima glottidis is wide. बेटा इसकी importance ये है कि this is the only muscle in the larynx that opens up the rima glottidis, that abducts the vocal cord, that moves the vocal cord apart. Other than that, all the other muscles, they bring the vocal cords close to each other. They close the glottis. Now what happens is, अगर ये muscle damage हो जाए, for any reason, if this muscle is damaged or the nerve supply to this muscle is damaged, ये muscle paralyzed हो गया, अब क्या होगा? Vocal cords cannot move apart. They are lying in the midline together. They are unable to move apart. When they are unable to move apart, glottis will not open. When the glottis does not open, when the rima glottidis does not open, no air goes inside. Result क्या होगा? When no air goes, यहाँ पे देख लीजिए, इसको खोलने वाला कोई नहीं है. When no air goes inside, result क्या है? Can somebody tell me? When no air goes inside the rima glottidis, what will happen? आपके ख्याल में क्या होगा? No air is going inside the larynx. क्या होगा? लैरिंक्स से एयर कहाँ जाती है? फ्रॉम द लैरिंक्स इट गोज इनटू द, अभी पढ़ा है आपको, फातिमा ने पढ़ाया है. फ्रॉम द लैरिंक्स द एयर गोज इनटू द, somebody come on, बोलो बोलो बोलो, आई एम वेटिंग, हरी अप. लैरिंक्स से एयर कहाँ गई? The larynx continues down with this structure which is the trachea. So larynx से एयर गई ट्रेकिया में. So अगर ट्रेकिया में एयर नहीं जाएगी तो फिर क्या होगा? बंद हो गई ये. लैरिंक्स में एयर नहीं गई, लैरिंक्स में नहीं गई, ट्रेकिया में नहीं गई, ट्रेकिया में नहीं गई, ट्रेकिया से नीचे क्या पड़ा हुआ है? ट्रेकिया से what is lying inferior to the trachea? The air bronchi. Bronchi is part of which what? बेटा लैरिंक्स से ट्रेकिया, ट्रेकिया से ब्रोंकाई. फिर आगे बोलो. बिल्कुल ठीक बोल रहे हो, बिल्कुल सही ऑर्डर में चल रहे हो, ठीक है ना. ब्रोंकाई, लंग्स, यस. व्हेन द एयर फेल्स टू एंटर द लंग्स, फिर क्या होगा? देखो लैरिंक्स एक है, लंग्स दो हैं, तो अब उसका मतलब है दोनों लंग्स कोलैप्स कर जाएंगी, तो फिर क्या होगा? स्टॉप ब्रीदिंग. And when the person stops breathing, what happens? Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. This is what happens. Yes, death. So उसका मतलब है कि this is the only muscle that keeps the vocal cords apart during respiration. And when this muscle on both sides, bilateral damage अगर होता है इसकी nerve supply को, and bilaterally both the muscles, posterior glycoarytenoid, both of them are destroyed, जो कि हो सकता है, जो कि होता है. thyroidectomy carefully नहीं की गई. recurrent laryngeal nerve, अभी आपको बताया, all the muscles are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve except trachothyroid जिसकी बीमारी नहीं आई. So अगर bilateral damage to the recurrent laryngeal nerve हो thyroidectomy के दौरान, आपको बताया था thyroidectomy में it is very important to save the recurrent laryngeal nerves. अब आपको समझ आई क्यों? ये this is the ultimate important. बेटा lateral cricoarytenoid अगर damage हो जाए, you have the oblique arytenoids, you have the transverse arytenoids, कोई ना कोई तो compensate कर सकता है ना. This is the only muscle that moves the vocal cords apart. So this is the most important muscle in the entire head and neck. ये नहीं, ये muscles, ये दोनों muscles काम नहीं करेंगे तो the person can die. In fact, coming to think of it, बेटा, अगर आप एक मिनट के लिए सोचो तो I would say this is the most important muscle in the entire body. ठीक है ना. और कौन सा मसल है जिसके पैरालिसिस से डेथ हो जाए? आप कार्डिक मसल कहोगे, हार्ट का मसल. हार्ट के मसल एक तो इतना एक्सटेंसिव डैमेज नहीं होता कि पूरा का पूरा हार्ट ही पैरालाइज हो जाए. कैसे पैरालाइज होगा? ऑटोनॉमिक चलता तो रहेगा. So this is the single most important muscle in the entire body. ये आपका इंस्टिट्यूट आता है. The most important muscle in the head and neck is, and this is posterior glycoarytenoid. Do I make myself clear? बात समझ में आई है? ठीक है? Okay, good. I'm glad. Thank you all of you. जल्दी से आगे चलते हैं, बिकॉज आगे कोई खास चीज इसमें नहीं रह गई. जल्दी से इसको खत्म करें. लैरिंक्स को आज तो एयर करना था. एनीवे, अच्छा जी, स्फिंक्टर्स की बात कर लेते हैं. स्फिंक्टर्स एक्शन जो है ना, दैट इज नॉट by any single muscle. It is a combination of all the muscles. ठीक है, जो कि laryngeal inlet पे act करते हैं. The laryngeal inlet is acted upon by this epiglottic muscle, glycoarytenoids, transverse arytenoids, ठीक है जी, and एक lateral cricoarytenoid भी होते हैं जो इस वक्त मेरे पास नहीं है यहाँ. All these muscles, when they act together, they pull this epiglottis down and they approximate the arytenoid cartilages to the epiglottis. ये नीचे आ जाता है, ये थोड़ा सा elevate हो जाएंगे, and this closes the inlet so that any food or fluid or whatever slips over the external surface of the epiglottis. Then let's come to the tensors of the larynx. Cricothyroid. Cricoid cartilage, this is the thyroid cartilage. So between the thyroid cartilage and the cricoid cartilage, this is the cricothyroid muscle. Okay. Cricothyroid. Okay. Now what happens is, this muscle, आपको पता है, the only muscle supplied by the external laryngeal nerve. ये जो muscle है, when it contracts, it pulls the thyroid cartilage downwards and it pulls it forwards. Okay? So anteriorly and inferiorly. ये जो prominence of the thyroid cartilage है ना, ये prominence, Adam's apple जिसको कहते हैं, this is pulled forwards and it is pulled downwards. Okay? अब उसका result क्या है? When it is pulled forwards and downwards, तो ये जो distance है between the thyroid cartilage and the arytenoid, the vocal process, the arytenoid, ये distance, this will increase. Thyroid cartilage जो आगे की तरफ आगे, this distance will increase. With the increase of the distance, ये जो vocal ligaments आपको पता है, they are attached to the arytenoid cartilage and the inside of the thyroid cartilage. So with increase in distance, this vocal ligament या vocal cords ये stretch कर जाते हैं. The length increases, and when the length increases, so there's an increase in pitch of voice. So this is what happens when the pitch of voice increases, because with the contraction of this muscle, cricothyroid, the Adam's apple, yeah, the prominence of the thyroid cartilage, this is pulled downwards and forwards, with the result, the length between the arytenoid cartilages and the thyroid cartilage, ये increase कर जाती है. This increases the length of the vocal cord, which is attached to these two cartilages. And then, of course, you have relaxers. On the other hand, ये right, thyroarytenoid, arytenoid cartilage, thyroid cartilage, thyroarytenoid. This pulls the thyroid cartilage anteriorly. Arytenoid cartilage here. It pulls the arytenoid cartilages anteriorly. As a result, it relaxes the vocal ligament. And when the vocal ligament is relaxed, so the pitch of the voice is lowered. Vocalis muscle, अभी हमने इसको किया था. एक quick recap, ठीक है? Vocalis muscle ये green में है. Medial to the vocalis muscle is lying the vocal fold, the vocal ligament. Lateral to the vocalis muscle is lying the thyroarytenoid muscle. Okay. It has very fine muscle fibers, and they make minute adjustments to the length and tension of the vocal ligament. So ये vocal ligaments को tense या relax करता है depending on what is required. ये singers में बहुत important है. Singers muscle. Quickly, let's go on to the arterial supply of the larynx. ये larynx है बेटा, ये superior thyroid artery, ये उसकी branch है, superior laryngeal artery, ठीक है. This plus the internal laryngeal nerve, it pierces the thyrohyoid membrane and enters the larynx. Okay, divides into multiple branches that supply the inside of the larynx. दूसरा एक और इसकी superior thyroid की branch है, ये देख लीजिए, cricothyroid artery है, ये इस मसल को सप्लाई करते हैं क्राइकोथायरॉइड को, और इसके साथ ही inferior laryngeal artery भी है. ये this inferior laryngeal artery is simply a branch of the inferior thyroid. ये inferior thyroid है, इससे ये branch inferior laryngeal rise कर रही है. ठीक है. So this plus the recurrent laryngeal nerve, this passes deep to the, in fact it enters the larynx deep to the lower border of the inferior pharyngeal constrictor, or it supplies the mucous membrane of the lower half of the infraglottic part of the larynx. अभी इस पे आ जाते हैं. Venous drainage अपनी arteries के साथ travel करती हैं. Superior laryngeal जो है वो superior thyroid artery के साथ travel करती हुई internal jugular vein में चली जाती है, जबकि inferior laryngeal जो है, inferior laryngeal vein जो है, that accompanies the inferior thyroid artery and goes into the brachiocephalic vein over here. ठीक है. Lymphatic drainage जो है उसको हम divide करते हैं, the part above the glottis and part below the glottis, that is the part above the vocal folds and part below the vocal folds. Above the vocal folds, the lymphatic drainage goes into the upper deep cervical lymph nodes, the superior deep cervical lymph nodes, and below the vocal folds, it goes into the pretracheal, the paratracheal lymph nodes, and then ultimately into the lower deep cervical lymph nodes, the inferior deep cervical. Nerve supply is extremely important. ये बात याद रख लेना कि the entire larynx is supplied by various branches of the vagus nerve, 10th cranial nerve. अब vagus nerve की एक branch है superior laryngeal nerve that arises from the over here. ये देख लीजिए, inferior vagal ganglion. This is the superior laryngeal nerve arising from the inferior vagal ganglion at the apex of the carotid triangle. It enters the carotid sheath, and then it divides. The superior laryngeal divides into two nerves, two terminal branches. One is the internal laryngeal, the other ये internal laryngeal nerve है. This is the external laryngeal nerve. Sorry, I'm sorry. जो internal laryngeal nerve है ना, that is wholly sensitive. ये जो internal laryngeal है, this is totally sensory. It enters, pierces the thyrohyoid membrane, ये देख लीजिए, enters the larynx, inside of the larynx, and provides sensory branches to the larynx. Then comes the external laryngeal nerve. हमने अभी बात की थी. External laryngeal nerve is motor and it supplies just one muscle, and that is cricothyroid. Internal laryngeal nerve, ये आपको दिखा दिया मैंने. Internal laryngeal nerve है, entering thyroid membrane, passes into the inside of the larynx. और अब supply क्या करती है ये? Not the entire larynx, ठीक है, इसलिए मैं supply बता रही हूँ आपको. It supplies the vestibule, the middle part, and this part above the upper part of the vocal cords, true vocal cords. True vocal cords. Okay? Yeah. So ये सारा part जो है इसकी sensory supply internal laryngeal nerve से आती है. Here, this is the nerve. External laryngeal nerve आपको बता दिया है, just one nerve, one muscle to be supplied by it. लेकिन उसमें ये देख लीजिए कि it is running, this external laryngeal nerve is running on the surface of the inferior constrictor of the pharynx. In fact, it also provides some motor fibers to the inferior pharyngeal constrictor before it goes on to supply the cricothyroid muscle. This runs with external laryngeal, runs with the superior thyroid artery and is in danger when the superior thyroid artery is ligated during the surgery, thyroidectomy. This is in danger because this external laryngeal nerve is in danger because it runs very close to the superior thyroid artery. Okay? But यहाँ पे, I hope you appreciate, over here it is running posterior to the sternothyroid muscle. यहाँ पे strap muscle, sternothyroid, will cover the sternolaryngel nerve. Inferior laryngeal is one of the terminal branches of recurrent laryngeal, या इसको continuation of recurrent laryngeal nerve कह देते हैं. ठीक है, ये है. अब ये जो है ना, it passes deep to the, ये inferior constrictor है. This recurrent laryngeal nerve gives off inferior laryngeal nerve that passes deep to the inferior border of the inferior pharyngeal constrictor. Okay? On the inside of the thyroid cartilage, this nerve, inferior laryngeal nerve, divides into two branches. This is the anterior branch, this is the posterior branch. अब ये सप्लाई क्या करते हैं? पहली बात तो ये है sensory supply. Let's finish off with the sensory supply. The sensory supply is to the infraglottic part of the pharynx. ये glottis है, that means ये vocal, true vocal cords हैं या vocal folds हैं. All this area below the vocal cords. This is the infraglottic space, cricoid cartilage के lower quadrant पर. All this area is supplied by the inferior laryngeal nerve. Right? And then, अब इसकी motor nerve supply पे आ जाते हैं बेटा. Motor nerve supply, I told you, anterior और posterior branches में divide कर जाती है inferior laryngeal nerve. क्या क्या supply करते हैं बेटा? Let's do it one by one. Lateral cricoarytenoid, ये वाला muscle, ठीक है. Then it is thyroarytenoid, ये. Vocalis हम already देख चुके हुए हैं. Airy epiglotticus, ये है airy epiglotticus, and then thyroepiglotticus. कहाँ पे है? Thyroepiglottic, ये thyroepiglottic, ठीक है. Posterior branch जो है उसकी posterior cricoarytenoid, ये posterior cricoarytenoid, ये lateral cricoarytenoid है, and then of course you have these oblique arytenoid and transverse arytenoids as well. Okay. Lateral cricoarytenoid, I'm sorry, वो anterior branch से होता था, इसको posterior cricoarytenoid कहते हैं. Posterior branch को, is posterior branch supplies the posterior cricoarytenoid, anterior branch supplies the lateral cricoarytenoid. बेटा ये आपको इसी तरह ही memorize करना है. This is unfortunate, but yes. So before we go on to the internal layer, please, do we have any questions? One last. One last time. Do we have any questions? Anything in the larynx No, ma'am. Aman says no, ma'am. नहीं है कोई questions. Let's start with the internal layer. शुरू तो करें ना. External layer, middle layer आप already कर चुके हैं डॉक्टर फातिमा के साथ. Let's start with the internal layer. Internal layer is that part of the hair which is concerned with receiving sound. Plus, it maintains balance. Okay? So it receives sound waves and it maintains balance. It is lying in this bone, which is the petrous part of the temporal bone. अब ये जो internal layer है, it is divided, has two parts. Number one, it is made up of bone. Labyrinth है basically, भूलभुलैया. So it is a bony labyrinth, and this is the purple thing that you see. This is the membranous labyrinth. और ये जो dark brown सा नजर आ रहा है, this is the bony labyrinth. Lying inside the membranous labyrinth, all know, is the endolymph. Between the membranous labyrinth and this bony labyrinth, this brown space में you have perilymph. ठीक है? And one thing, ये ना समझना, sorry, please don't believe कि ये जो membranous labyrinth है, this is floating inside the bony labyrinth. ऐसा नहीं होता है. This membranous labyrinth is connected to the bony labyrinth by strands. जिस तरह हमने subarachnoid space में देखा था ना, there were strands connecting the arachnoid and pia mater. बिल्कुल इस तरह ये membranous labyrinth जो है, this connects the membranous labyrinth to the bony labyrinth. So अगर हम इसको देखें तो please, this is the bony labyrinth, this is the membranous labyrinth, blue में. Between the bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth, we have the perilymph, this fluid, and inside the membranous labyrinth, we have this fluid which is called endolymph. Which is clear हुई? इसमें तो I hope कोई questions नहीं होंगे. क्या है? I guess नहीं है. Let's move ahead. Let's start with the bony labyrinth first. अब ये जो bony labyrinth है ना, पहली बात तो ये है कि आपको बताया था it is lying in the petrous part of the temporal bone. ये petrous part of temporal bone है और ये देख लीजिए, ये इसमें ये internal layer सारा पड़ा हुआ है इस तरह. ठीक है? ये internal acoustic meat है सब. और ये external acoustic meatus आपने outer opening of the air आपने पढ़ ली थी. This is the internal acoustic meatus. और ये देख लीजिए कि ये total internal air जो है ये petrous part of temporal bone में पड़ा हुआ है. Now lying, अब ये brown सा जो है ना, this is all bone, ये dark brown, ये सारा bony labyrinth है. And lying inside the bony labyrinth are multiple cavities. इसमें ये semicircular canals हैं, ये देख लीजिए. उसमें ventricles हैं, उसमें saccules हैं, etc. ठीक है? ये नाम हमने कुछ दिन पहले पढ़े थे न्यूरोलॉजी में. Now, surrounding this brown part, this is a lighter brown part here. This is the otic capsule. हमने आपको शायद याद हो, हमने otic capsule पढ़ा था. This is just a bone. उसकी density different है. It is more dense than this bone, yeah, the surrounding bone. So immediately outside the membranous labyrinth is the bony labyrinth, and immediately outside the bony labyrinth is the otic capsule यहाँ पे, और otic capsule is simply denser bone. ठीक है, so it is bony labyrinth अंदर है और otic capsule बाहर, and inside you have multiple cavities. ये सारी मैंने आपको दिखा दी, ये ब्लू में जो नजर आ रहा है आपको सेमी सर्कुलर कैनाल्स है, वेंट्रिकल है और सैक्यूल है. अच्छा जी, वन क्विक लो, ये आपको मैंने करवाया था, इसलिए एक दफा मैं इसको रिपीट करने लगी हूँ और फिर हम आगे चलते हैं. देखो बेटा, ये जो है ना, दिस इज ऑल अ बोनी स्ट्रक्चर. ठीक है, अब इस बोनी लैबिरिंथ में वी हैव दिस कॉक्लिया 2.5 टर्न्स जो कि एंटर करता है, स्पाइरल टर्न्स है 2.5 टर्न्स, ये देख लीजिए हमने बात की थी इसकी. ठीक है, एंड दिस opens into this part which is the vestibule, and I hope you remember मैंने अभी आपको दिखाया है, lying inside the bony labyrinth is the membranous labyrinth, और ये जो कॉक्लिया है इसके अंदर कॉक्लियर डक्ट पड़ी हुई है. ठीक है, और ये कॉक्लिया जो है that is concerned with hearing. So lying inside this cochlea is the cochlear duct. The entire structure, the cochlear, bony cochlea and the cochlear duct, they take 2.5 turns. Okay? And they start at the vestibule. ये सारा part vestibule. Now, ये जो cochlea है ना, it takes 2.5 turns around a central axis, a central core, which is cone shaped. बिल्कुल जिस तरह ये आपका पेच नहीं है, इसके ऊपर ये शार्प सी राउंड एंड राउंड ये स्ट्रक्चर पड़ा होता है, ये बिल्कुल उस तरह के सेंट्रल कोर है. इस सेंट्रल कोर को मोडियोलस कहते हैं ये, एंड दिस गोइंग राउंड एंड राउंड लाइक दिस इज द कॉक्लियर डक्ट. बोनी, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द बोनी लैबिरिंथ, ये कॉक्लियर डक्ट है. अब ये जो मोडियोलस है ना, दिस इज मेड अप ऑफ स्पंजी बोन, और आपको बताया था डेवलप्स बाय इंट्रामेम्ब्रेनस ऑसिफिकेशन, स्पंजी बोन. ये इन रियलिटी ये सेंटर में जो रन कर रहा है ये मोडियोलस है, एंड दिस इज द 2.5 टर्न्स ऑफ कॉक्लिया, ये गोइंग राउंड एंड राउंड. अब इस रनिंग थ्रू द मोडियोलस सेवरल कैनाल्स, इन कैनाल्स में से ब्लड वेसल्स पास करती हैं और कॉक्लियर नर्व भी पास करती है. और यहाँ पे ये देखिए ये कॉक्लिया है, ये लोअर मोस्ट या बेसल टर्न ऑफ द कॉक्लिया है, ये मिड लेयर कैविटी आप पढ़ चुके हैं, ये टिम्पैनिक मेम्ब्रेन है. प्लीज नोट कि ये जो बेसल टर्न ऑफ कॉक्लिया है, दिस इज प्रोड्यूसिंग एन एलिवेशन इन द मीडियल वॉल ऑफ द मिड लेयर कैविटी. दिस एलिवेशन इज कॉल्ड promontory. This elevation is called promontory. एक चीज और देखिए, अभी आपको मैंने कहा था कि ये दिस इज द मोडियोलस, ठीक है ना, और आपको कहा था कि गोइंग राउंड एंड राउंड दिस मोडियोलस इज द कॉक्लिया या कॉक्लियर डक्ट, जो भी आप कहना चाहें. बेटा अटैच बिल्कुल जिस तरह इस पेज के ऊपर ये शार्प सी सर्कल इन स्पाइरल बना हुआ है, हाथ लगाएं शार्प है, बिल्कुल इस तरह इन रियलिटी इन ह्यूमंस इस मोडियोलस के ऊपर दिस शार्प एज ऑफ बोन इज गोइंग राउंड एंड राउंड, जस्ट एज दिस स्पाइरल स्ट्रक्चर इज गोइंग राउंड एंड राउंड दिस ग्रूव. ये जो शार्प सा स्ट्रक्चर which is going attached onto the modiolus, this is called osseous spiral lamina. ये जो अंदर ये ब्राउन सा नजर आ रहा है ना, लाइटर ब्राउन, ये osseous spiral lamina है, और ये उसके बाद ये cochlear duct है. So the cochlear duct is actually attached to the osseous spiral lamina. We'll stop over here. Any questions? We are in the last 1 minute. Any questions? In the last minute. अब कोई minute नहीं रह गया. Thank you very much. I'll see you on Wednesday, inshallah. God bless you.